Mr. John, you guys know each other? Mr. Choi, that's great. There was an awkward silence. No one spoke. The four just stared at each other, still processing. But then Mr. John said, snapping them to reality, "You guys are okay?" They came out of their thoughts and realized they shouted the "no way" inside their heart, but also inside. Taeyong, yeah, Dad, we were university classmates. Jungkook, we know each other. They said, looking at Mr. John, but obviously their tone sounds like they are forcing themselves to talk, while Ryan and Yun just nodded their head as faking a smile. Mrs. Choi, so you guys know each other. What a coincidence. Mrs. John, that's a great thing, she said while sitting on the chair. Mr. John, okay, now sit down, dear, he said to Ryan and Yun, pointing the chair to them. They nodded and said, but then. Jungkook, you didn't even spare me after 5 years. Why are you following me everywhere? He asked her, sitting on his seat while whispering to her. Yun, that's literally my thought. Why are you everywhere I go? She whispered back. Taeyong, are you really Mr. Choi daughter or what? He whispered to Ryan without looking at her and sitting on his seat. Ryan, I guess it's my question. Are you really Mr. Johnson? Taeyong, for a while he stopped and just sat there gazing down, and then he said looking at her, "Yes, I am." Mr. John, so I guess you guys don't need to introduce each other. Mr. Choi, well, we never know you know each other. Four of them faked an awkward smile and grabbed the knife and fork. Taeyong Po, what the hell is happening? He thought, looking down at the food while his grip around the knife and fork tightened. Ryan Po, why the hell it has to be him? She thought, closing her eyes in annoyance. Jungkook Po have to deal with this part again, he said, glaring at her with his thin eyes and taking a bite with fork. Yun, gosh, not this jerk again. She started taking a bite as well. But four of them glanced towards their parents as Mr. John said. Mr. John, so how is work going, Mr. Choi? Mr. Choi, everything is well, Mr. John. I heard you took partnership with Mr. Hong. Mr. John nodded. Since we both wanted. Mr. Choi, well, I guess you don't need to worry about business when you have such smart sons, Mr. Choi said, gazing at JK and Taeyong. As Mr. Choi said, gazing at both Taeyong and Jungkook gave a light smile, cutting their food with a knife. Mrs. Choi, well, I'm so glad we are going to be a family. Mrs. John, it's our pleasure, Mrs. Choi. They both smiled while the four of them just gazed at each other before keeping a done face. Jungkook, why are you behind my back like a witch? He whispered. Yun, what did you say? She whispered back, but her voice is a threat. Jungkook, I said Prat. He whispered, but a small spring appeared on his face. Yun, jerk. Jungkook, jerk, huh? Or soon to be husband? Yun glared at him. You're pissing me off, she whispered back. Jungkook, what would you do if I did? What's gonna stop me? Yun, me, she glared at him, whispering. While their parents were busy in their conversation, Jungkook chuckles. Really? And how you gonna do that, poor girl? Yun, like this, she said, stomping her foot on his. Jungkook, ouch! He hissed in pain, gaining all their attention towards him. Mr. John, what's wrong, son? Mr. John asked when he finally stopped talking with Mr. Choi. Jungkook, what? Nothing, Dad. He shrugged his shoulders, giving a nervous laugh. Mr. John nodded and again started his talk with Mr. Choi. The fathers were busy in talking about business while the ladies about their beauty. Jungkook, you're gonna pay for that later, he whispered while his words sound like a threat to her, but she doesn't care and sprang to herself. Yun, best of luck, she whispered, adding fuel and fire. Yun ate silently while sprinting lightly, while Ryan and Taeyong looked at them as they know Jungkook and Yun can't stay silent for a minute. Ryan and Taeyong were eating quietly as they both don't even like to talk. Few minutes later. Mr. John, did you find something about him? Mr. Choi, well, my guards are working but unfortunately can't able to find any clue. He's playing so smart to get caught. They were talking seriously but then Mr. Choi glared at Yun and Ryan and said, Mr. Choi, Ryan and Yun, why don't you guys have a personal talk with your fiancé? Yun and Jungkook, who were kicking food under the table, looked at Mr. Choi. Then Mr. John said, looking at them, Mr. John, yeah, Taehyung and Jungkook, you can have a personal talk with the girls. Yun, no, Dad, we are. Jungkook, oh, sure, Dad, he said and stood up while Yun glared at him. Jungkook, let's go, Miss Yun, he asked in a teasy tone while pointing towards the balcony of the restaurant. Yun gritted her teeth. Sure, Mr. John. She gave a fake smile, standing up while her hand made a fist. He smiled lightly, enjoying her frustrated look. They both walked away. They walked towards the restaurant balcony. Jungkook's expression changed and he placed his hand beside her head on the wall, almost pinning her. Jungkook, what do you think, huh? You can escape after stomping my foot like that? He said while his voice sounds like a threat. Yun, she just rolled her eyes and jerked his hand and walked to the rail and rested her arms there. Who messed first? She said in a sassy tone. He left a dark chuckle. Jungkook, I just stated the fat brat. Didn't you hear your parents? Yun, well, that's never gonna happen. Jungkook, I wish the same. He leaned close to her. Why don't you just reject this all? Cause I never wish to see you again. Yun, she swings and chuckles. Yun, why don't you do that instead? Cause I wish the same. She whispers, staring at his eyes, leaning close as well. Jungkook, he moved back and kept his hand inside his pocket. You know what? You never change it. Bold replies and same attitude. Yun rolled her eyes. Why would I change for someone? Jungkook, whatever. He leaned close again. Just cancel this all, and that will be better for both of us. Yun, why are you begging me to do that? Can't you tell your dad about this? Jungkook, beg? My foot. I'm just trying to save your life. Yun, trying to save my life or scared of my presence in your life? Jungkook, why? What can you do? Can you even handle me? He shrinked. Yun, that's my question. She shrinked as well, not breaking the daring eye contact. Jungkook, I hate your attitude, he said with a shrink but in a dangerous tone. Yun, and I hate you, she replied sassily. He stared at her with his hands in his pocket, and she stared at him, resting her arms on the rail, facing him. They both stood there staring and challenging each other with their eyes. Meanwhile, while their parents were having busy conversation, they both looked at each other with cold faces. Taeyang Po, it's you again. Ryan Po, I never wanted to meet you again. Taeyang Po, either I. Ryan Po, then why are you here again? Taeyang Po, I wish I was not. They both stared at each other, talking with their eyes with a cold and their usual expression. But they came out of their thought when their parents said, Mr. Choi, Ryan, Taeyong, why don't you both have a talk as well? Mr. John, yeah, you met after 5 years, so must be curious about each other's life, so had a talk together. They both gazed at each other, then Mrs. John said, Mrs. John, don't be shy with your soon-to-be fiancé. Mrs. Choi, right, she chuckles as well. Taeyong and Ryan sighed and stood up. Taeyong glanced at her before walking away, keeping his hands in his pocket. Ryan walked behind him. Mrs. John, they both have the same personalities. Mrs. Choi, yeah, Taeyong is like a male version of Ryan. They both laughed, more like chuckled. There was an awkward silence. Only the sound of footsteps can be heard. Both of their hands were inside their coat pocket, and both of them having a cold face and dark aura. None of them made eye contact or dared to speak first. They were just walking beside each other, looking straight. He glanced at her from the corner of his eyes, but she didn't look at him as she was walking front. He saw her having a cold face, hands inside her pocket. He glares at himself and notices that they both have similar posture, outfit, and attitude. He rolled his eyes and looked away. They never accept it, but they both have similar taste, style, attitude, and aura. But that's the only truth. And similar hate towards each other. As it was getting awkward, he finally said, breaking the silence. Taehyung, why it's you again? He asked her without looking at her. Why, I wonder the same. She replied without looking at him. Taehyung, why didn't you just reject the marriage proposal before? He asked her in an annoyed tone, finally looking at her. Why, I didn't know it was you though. She looked at him, replying in a sarcasm tone. Why, well, you still have time, just cancel this all. Why don't you do that instead? She looked at him. Taehyung, my dad won't let me. He looked away. Why, scared of dad? She left a chuckle while he poked his tongue in his cheek. Taehyung, correction, I respect him. Why, I do the same. I respect my dad's decision, she said, and he stopped walking and turned to her while she stood behind him. Taehyung, so you're just gonna agree for this? He asked in a barely loud voice, which sounds very disappointing. Why, reject it if you want to get away from this. Taehyung, I'm alerting you. Reject this or you're gonna regret marrying me, he said, stepping forward while his tone became serious and his eyes became dark. Wine, I did many times, and you know what? Your dad and my dad are stubborn than us, she said in a sassy way. Taeyong, then let it be. Don't blame me later for my behavior. Wine, are you worried about the future? Don't be worried. We will never gonna talk, and this marriage gonna change nothing between us, she said, leaving a dark chuckle, hand still inside her coat pocket. Taehyung, obvious thing, cause I hate you for real, and for this attitude. Wine, same thought. Both of them glared at each other. Their eyes were challenging each other.